Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. For the last over 3 years, there has been a tug-of-war of sorts between the central government and activists fighting for Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act beneficiaries about them being paid minimum wages. The Karnataka High Court and Andhra Pradesh High Court have specifically ordered that MGNREGA workers can't be denied minimum wages. However, the centre has challenged the Karnataka High Court order, though the Apex Court has denied a stay on the High Court order. The issue has once again gained importance after the distinguished social activist Aruna Roy announced that she did not want to be part of the National Advisory Council after her present term ended recently. In the letter to NAC chairperson Sonia Gandhi, Roy has expressed her disappointment about the Prime Minister rejecting the NAC's own recommendation to pay minimum wages to MGNREGA workers. This has revived the debate about whether the workers under this act, which is essentially aimed at supplementing jobs during the lean seasons, can come under the Minimum Wages Act. The opinions are divided, with those in government, especially the Prime Minister himself, having a different view. Today we will discuss whether the demand for minimum wages is justified and what would be the consequences of it all. To discuss this, I have with me NC Saxena, member of the National Advisory Council, TSR Subramanian, former Cabinet Secretary, Vrinda Grover, a Supreme Court advocate as well as a social activist, and Priya Ranjan, Managing Editor of the Financial Chronicle. Welcome to all of you. Let me come to Mr. Saxena first. Mr. Saxena, you people in the NACA had recommended it, sent it to the government. Sonia Gandhi also had written to the government, but this has not been implemented so far. The other argument is that this is not a full-time job or something like that where minimum wages can be applied to it. The thing is that it is just it's just supplementing a job during the lean seasons when people don't have work. So how can minimum wages be applied to this?
In fact, you have to look at it from the point of view of the states first. If you look at Indian states, you find that farm wages are about 400 rupees in Kerala and only 80 rupees in Madhya Pradesh.
Right.
So therefore, if Government of India has got 400 rupees, should you be giving 5 jobs in Madhya Pradesh or should you be giving 1 job in Kerala? That's the main issue. And therefore, if you want to give 5 jobs in Madhya Pradesh, it is important that there is some kind of disincentive for Kerala government to keep on running this scheme. Now, in the NAC, my own view was that minimum wages must be paid. There is no question about minimum wages not being paid. But Government of India has a right to decide that we will pay 120 rupees and link it with the consumer price agricultural labor. Let the rest be paid by the state government. Now, this would require changing the act. Government of India and the Ministry of Rural Development, when I talked to them, they said, look, changing the act is a cumbersome job.
Changing the Minimum Wages Act.
Minimum Wages Act is a state subject.
Yes.
Let me be very clear about this.
Okay.
Minimum Wages Act is a state subject.
So which
states have it? So you have to change the NREGA, which is the Rural Employment Guarantee Act, has to be changed.
Okay.
And that, because it was cumbersome, so they said we have taken Law Ministry's opinion that we can pay less than minimum wages, which is not a correct thing to do. The other point here is that if you start giving minimum wages as determined by the state government, it leads to a moral hazard problem. Supposing UP government today says that we want to give 1,000 rupees as minimum wage.
Right.
Should Government of India be paying 1,000 rupees? Not at all. Because, as I said, if farm wages are already very high, as in Kerala or in Tamil Nadu or in Himachal Pradesh, one should discourage. Unfortunately, the reverse is happening. I have here with me a statement for 2011-12, which shows that if work in NREGA was being done only by those who are the BPL, rural poor population, in Bihar only people get work only for 6 days. In Himachal Pradesh, they are getting work for 233 days. Tamil Nadu 191 days, Kerala 151 days. But Bihar is only 6 days, Assam is 17 days, Odisha is 17 days. It shows that the capacity for these states is limited, whereas there is no discouragement to the states.
Capacity, when you talk of capacity, because they don't have enough people to coming
Well,
in? Or?
I have studied Bihar in great detail. Bihar doesn't have block development officers. Bihar doesn't have junior engineers. They have not appointed these people, with the result that we calculated that Bihar government loses out something like 10,000 crores of government finance assistance under various programs, not only NREGA but other programs. So therefore, the program is doing very badly in poorer states. The program is doing very well. Now, how is it that in Himachal Pradesh 233 people number of days they are getting work? It is because migrants are working there. It is not the local people. So why are you running a scheme in a state
for the migrants?
These are the Bihari migrants.
The whole idea behind idea behind MGNREGA was to stop migration.
Naturally, if in Bihar you get job for only for 6 days and in UP you get only for 20 days, they have no other option to go and work
In some other
in
states.
Himachal Pradesh or in Tamil Nadu. That's the whole problem.
That is an interesting aspect which you have. But let me get Mr. TSR Subramanian in on this. Mr. Subramanian, the Minimum Wages Act, can it apply to the MGNREGA? Yes. Whatever has been the discussion so far, but you tell me, one of the arguments, sorry sir, is that it's just supplementing jobs. Mr. Saxena has just now explained why it should be implemented. Do you agree with it, or do you have another view on this?
Well, I have not followed, Girish, the discussions till now. So maybe what I say may not gel in properly or connect in a sequence. I think that in concept it's a good scheme. I think as in most schemes, there are huge leakages. As it has done a lot of good, it has also not fully met its purpose. On the specific question that you raise, yes, if it is meant to provide, my fundamental objection to the program is that it does not create permanent assets. It is digging one well, it was like the 100 billion, it like the 1 billion, it is like the million well scheme of about 30, 40 years back. You dig a pit here and take the sand there and take it back there. It doesn't create permanent assets. So I think that's a weakness. Having said that, it does provide income in rural areas. It meets a felt need. It has also encouraged large-scale badmashi. I think a couple of reports have recently come that it has not really reduced income disparity. Having said all that, it brings money to the rural areas, and if it is genuine work, minimum wages must be paid. Minimum wages are not too high in India. They must be paid. There is no reason. If it is work for a full day, they should be paid full minimum wages work a day. There cannot be half work day, a quarter full pay, half work full pay. If it is genuine work, it must be paid.
But it must come from the state government's budget. Whatever is additional to 120 rupees, which will come from Government of India, then the state should pay it. That will discourage the states from artificially raising the minimum wage under the Minimum Wages Act, which is the state government's prerogative.
Okay. Let me get Vrinda Grover in on this. Vrinda, let the states pay the remaining amount. You think all the states in this country are prepared to pay that? Every state says, in almost every state, we keep hearing all the time from chief ministers that we don't have funds. They keep on shifting the burden onto the center. Do you think the states will take up this burden?
I want to actually go back to a previous point here. I'm speaking here as somebody who is actually engaged in this petition in the Supreme Court.
Okay.
I'm representing those who were the petitioners in Karnataka and who are now the respondents in the petition filed by the union.
Right.
And I think the question that we need to squarely look at, and it's important to see that the people who filed the petition in Karnataka were actually the unions of NREGA workers.
Right.
And people who are actually working under NREGA. These were not activists who filed this. Secondly, why did the Karnataka and Andhra High Court say minimum wage is to be paid? And why did the Supreme Court also refuse to grant a stay in favor of the union? In fact, I think it's scandalous absolutely that the Union of India has even filed this petition. And why do I say so? Whether minimum wage should be paid or not is not subject to what kind of monies are available either in the state funds or in the central kitty. I think this country is still governed by a constitution. The constitution has laid down what is the mandate. The non-payment of minimum wage under the constitution amounts to a violation of the workers' fundamental right and is called forced labor under Article 23 of the constitution. If the government is going to ask them to perform labor, and this is, mind you, hard physical manual labor that is being performed, and you are going to give less than minimum wage, you are in violation of a constitutional guarantee provided to every citizen by the constitution, and we are talking about the most marginalized and vulnerable sections.
Right.
Secondly, the point that was raised by Mr. Srinivasan, that this is not creating durable assets. Actually, if you were to look at the annual report released by the Ministry of Rural Development
Mr.
last
Subramanian.
year
Mr.
to
Subramanian,
mark the
not
anniversary of MGNREGA. Sorry, Mr. Subramanian, I'm very sorry, I apologize. It clearly showed what were the durable assets that were created. It listed those durable assets. These are not just roads being done for the heck of it. There is actually durable assets being created across rural India. Now, under the convergence guidelines, which are taking place with various ministries, whether it's the forestry ministry, whether it's the road ministry, there are many such ministries. Actually, MGNREGA workers are being employed under the convergence guidelines to create and to perform these works. So what this is actually is regular work, which the state is going to take in order to, whatever is set out as its agenda, that this is what it needs to create.
Right.
You are now taking from the pool of MGNREGA workers and paying them less than minimum wages. If you were to take it from the regular pool of workers, you would have had to pay them minimum wages. And
Vrinda,
the question that you began
yes.
this discussion with,
Yes.
that this is
Please continue.
just one point, that this is part-time employment that is being provided. That is in the statute, that you have to provide 100-day employment. This issue has been deliberated by the Supreme Court twice. In the PUDR case of 1982, when this issue was raised in the context of the Asiad workers for the construction of Asiad Games. And secondly, in the Sanjeet Roy case, when actually a very, very similar situation had arisen. Due to famine, in Rajasthan, roads were being constructed. There was a special law over there which said there will be exemption from minimum wages for those workers who are being provided distress employment during famine. The Supreme Court said, whatever be the nature of the employment, if you are not going to pay minimum wages, it is forced labor, which the Constitution does not permit at all.
Vrinda, one of the arguments is that, which I will get Mr. Saxena also on this, that now according to the MGNREGA, the extended guidelines which has been issued, these works can also be done on their own farmland also. So now when they are working on their own farmland and getting paid, so can minimum wages be effective there?
I'm sorry, I really don't have, I'm not privy to those guidelines. It would be hard for me to comment.
Okay.
One would need to see what those farmlands are.
I think Mr. Saxena wants to respond to that.
In fact, on this point, let me say that NREGA had always this provision that work can be done on the farm of the certain kind of people. That list has been extended.
Yes.
It was only scheduled tribe and scheduled caste.
Right.
Now it has been extended to marginal and small farmers also.
Yes.
Now the main point, let me stress it again, is that if the state governments have the right to fix the minimum wages and Government of India has to bear the entire expenditure, it will lead to a moral hazard problem. Let me give an example. Supposing Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, farm wages are 80 rupees and Government of India pays 120 rupees. One of these two states keeps minimum wages at 100 rupees, the other state raises it to 200 rupees. So therefore, this state will then benefit. In order to see that the states act in a responsible manner, it is very important that Government of India has a national wage fix as 120 rupees. If the states want to pay more, certainly that will discourage states like Kerala and Himachal Pradesh, which are labor scarce states, to implement this program. The reverse is happening. In those states, you find people are getting work for 200 days, whereas in poorer states, there is no work. And the other point is about fiscal deficit. Let me say that if you look at fiscal deficit issue, you find Government of India has a higher fiscal deficit than most of the states, except for Punjab and Kerala and West Bengal. All other states' fiscal deficit is much less than the state governments. But it is not a question of a state deficit. It's a question of discouraging those states where wages are already very high.
Priya Ranjan, do you agree with this theory that you have to discourage other states where wages are very high?
Labor scarce states.
Bring in this minimum wages act so there is uniformity.
See, minimum wage act or the minimum wages that is fixed by the states, minimum wage acts, that is not implemented. So you have, in many cases, you have a minimum wage, but the actual prevailing wage in rural areas for agricultural workers is much less. Now, if you look at the NREGA wages in Karnataka, for instance. Now, in Karnataka, since the inception of this scheme, it has come from some 69 rupees to 127 rupees,
in fact,
to 172 rupees now.
In fact, if I'm not wrong, yeah, you please continue. We'll come to that.
172 rupees now. Now, as long as this wage being revised every year, and it is now linked to the consumer price index for agricultural workers,
right,
the NREGA wage is actually setting a true benchmark for minimum wages.
Right.
So you have a statutory minimum wage, but the actual benchmark is being set by the NREGA wage. Although in principle, I would say that you cannot have such a scheme which is being called as an employment guarantee scheme and not paying the minimum wage if you are looking at inclusive development.
Yes.
So in principle, and it's been mentioned about constitutional rights and things like that, so that is perfectly in order. But practically if you look at it, the NREGA is a misnomer. It is not supposed to be an employment scheme. It is an anti-poverty relief program. Essentially, this is what it is. Now, what has happened is, this scheme has worked well. If you look at the real objective of it, it is worked as a relief program. You have had some positive
yes,
impact.
Just clarify this point. Let me go back to Rajasthan, where NREGA works. In Rajasthan, according to the latest figures, farm wages are around 105 rupees per day.
Right.
Okay. Government of India pays 121 rupees under NREGA. Minimum wages are 146 rupees. Aruna's point is that Government of India should pay 146 rupees. My point is, because the farm wages are 100, Government of India is already paying 121. Therefore, if the state wants to pay 146, let them pay the remaining 25.
Let the government of Rajasthan pay.
Rajasthan pay 25 rupees.
Yes.
She says, no, Government of India should pay everything. Then the chances are that Government of Rajasthan will increase it further to 180 rupees. That's a moral hazard problem.
See, a more important issue is, I would say, the number of days for which employment is being guaranteed. Now, we've had the experience, if you look at the national average, it's 42 days,
Yes.
not 100 days. So
it is 38 now.
38.
it's 38 now. Now, if that is the kind of average, the priority should be that, since it's a relief program, the priority should be actually to ensure that the number of days for which employment is being made available, for whatever reason it is not being available, it could be lack of capacity in many states, as it's been mentioned. Now, that should be the priority rather than looking at already the wage, which is already indexed to some kind of an inflation.
We'll come to that indexing thing. Vrinda, you wanted to respond to some Mr. Saxena, or yes, Vrinda.
Yes. I think this refrain that we go on, that the states are going to hold the central government to ransom by hiking their minimum wages, as though there is some kind of fiendish pleasure they are deriving out of it. I think let's look at some hard data over here. One, whenever the state government is going to raise the minimum wage, it is not only going to place a burden on the central government to provide that kind of monies for those things that come under central employment, but is also placing that burden upon itself. After all, the state is going to have to provide for all its works, that minimum wage to its workers also. So it's not as though it can, just merrily pass this kind of minimum wages and have nothing to do with it.
Okay.
Secondly, we actually do not see this trend at all, except for UP, which showed a sharp rise, and that too because minimum wages had not been altered in UP for 10 years. We therefore saw a little bit of a rise in UP. Otherwise, we do not see this rise dramatically taking place by opposition states in order to trouble the center.
Okay.
So there is no empirical evidence for this kind of paranoia that we are talking of.
I'm sure Mr. Saxena would like to respond to it. But before that, we need to go into a very short break now. We'll come back and continue this discussion. There are several other issues involved. This is something which needs to be discussed. I'm sure all my panelists will be responding to it. Please keep watching and come back very soon. Welcome back. We are discussing whether minimum wages should be applied to the Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Scheme workers. Mr. Subramanian, so Subramanian, one of the arguments is that the indexing wages have been indexed with the CPI, and so it as far as the inflation is concerned, it is taken care of. So why have this? Why do you bring minimum wages also in this?
I'm not, Girish, I'm not very fully familiar with all the details.
Yes.
My common sense says that if you have allowed the states to fix a minimum wage, that's a statutory minimum wage. After all, you have to trust your own states. After all, as somebody pointed out, if they fix a minimum wage for purpose A, it will apply for purpose B, C, and D. I don't think we should now quibble. I think as a matter of principle, it is not a very major association. Yes, conditions differ from state to state, even district to district.
No, but
and I think minimum wages should be applicable.
Mr.
I have two other, you mentioned larger questions here.
Yes.
Will you give me half a minute to depart from the wage question about which much has been discussed?
Yes.
Two other points. My good friend Naresh Saxena just mentioned about inclusive growth. I take strong objection to it. It is an official term. I also find that this is an artificial debate that has been created here. When in a country with massive poverty, 60, 70 people, with the worst indicators of public health and the primary education and everything, where the poor man is shortchanged, this country is not for 70% of the people, we are quibbling on whether 10 rupees more or 10 rupees less. I think this is a fraud. Sorry for using strong language. We have on the one hand the government having an approach to bring FDI in very large scale and changing the financial sector. We are talking of inclusive growth as if these Adivasis and these people are all foreigners. We have to include them. They are India, not you and me. Not you and me sitting in studios. I'm afraid Aruna Roy, I don't know her well, she has got a point that our fundamental is wonky. We are not at all on the right track. We are now taking 5% of the problem and flogging it. 70% of the problem we are not looking at.
Well, let me clarify.
No, I want Mr. Subramanian to respond to this. Mr. Subramanian, I'll get your response to what he said. But Mr. Subramanian, very quickly, do you agree with what Mr. Saxena says that index it to the minimum wages, the states will decide, and whatever the difference between what the center fixes for all over the country, let the states take care of that burden?
Fair enough. I don't see that as a wrong. I don't see that as a bad formula. So long as the differential is not very high, and so long as the local wages are not particularly higher than elsewhere. So long as you have any credible formula, but there should be a minimum wage.
Okay.
Let me see. I had always advocated. In fact, I wrote a letter to the ministry that in the poorest 200 districts, you increase the number of days from 100 to 200.
Yes.
Because I'm really very keen that in these areas where farm wages are less than 80 rupees, somewhere 60 rupees or 70 rupees, they must get the advantage of 121 rupees.
Right.
And they would then therefore be lifted above poverty. Equally, I am keen that in states like Kerala, where farm wages are 400 rupees, there is no point in doing NREGA there.
Exactly.
But because we have an All India Act, we cannot say Kerala is excluded for political reasons also. Therefore, the best way to discourage money going to states like Kerala or Himachal Pradesh is by saying that we are going to pay 120 rupees If you want to pay 400 rupees, certainly pay more.
Yes, Vrinda, is that the best way out?
Yes, I want to make two.
Yes.
I want to make 2 points here.
Yes.
One, that is there actually a paucity of funds in the center for which we are suggesting now that let the state take care of the excess burden of minimum wages? Is that borne out by the figures that are before us?
Mr. Saxena?
When we
Yes.
filed our
Why-
affidavit in the Supreme Court,
Yes.
and we looked at all the figures that were available to us, we saw that there were a surplus that year in 2010-2011 of 33,000 crores.
Let me get
In the
Vrinda.
leftover as surplus from.
Vrinda, let me get Mr. Saxena
When
in
the
on this.
program
Yes.
became universal.
Can I just
Let
can I
Mr.
just finish? Can I finish my point?
Okay,
I'm sure
quickly.
Mr. Saxena would know.
Yeah.
Would know better. Let me just finish my point.
Okay.
One, that there is actually money available. Why are we therefore throwing it into this very hazardous space where the state and the center we know can try and start this crap, and it will be nobody's responsibility, and you are then going to leave it to the person who needs the money most. As Mr. Subramanian very rightly pointed out, the most marginalized and vulnerable citizen is then going to have to agitate for minimum wage when there is no shortage of money. I think this is actually
Okay.
not the correct direction in
it
which
is
we should be
generally
moving.
known
How
to
is minimum wage to be determined? Can we revisit the how minimum wage is going to be determined in the country?
Okay. Yes,
Everyone knows about this, that in the month of March 2013, the finance minister denied about 70,000 crores for the social sector. And the difference between BE and RE figures was very, very high.
You're right.
Now, if you look at NREGA itself, you find that in 2007, when the program became universal, the budget was 48,000 crores.
Right.
Last year, it was only 32,000 crores.
Yes.
The number of days, the average number of days was 48. It has come down to 34 or so. So therefore, it does show. Of course, there is always
What
some
does it show?
unspent.
What does it show?
It shows that Government of India is reducing budget
Right.
for NREGA and states, because there are many problems. You know, this
Because
wages
there is no
are not-
capacity. Is this because of the lack
it
of
is-
capacity
it
in
is
many
because
states?
of also the fact that Government of India decided, which is not a good decision, that all wages would be paid through the banks.
Yes.
And it takes about 6 months to 2 years for people to get wages. They can't wait. They can't wait for 2 years for their wages. There are a large number of cases where wages have not. And mind you, the law says that if you have not worked for 100 days, you will get unemployment allowance. Unemployment allowance in the last 5 years has been given only in 65 or 70 cases. That's all. It should
Okay.
be given in crores of cases.
So, Vrinda, you have your answer to your question. He says that actually yes, Vrinda, quickly if you
I'm
want to
afraid I
respond.
don't think it answers my question at all.
It doesn't answer.
Yes,
It doesn't
very
answer our
quickly,
question.
There are some snags in the system.
There
We
are
need to
snags.
revisit and see how to plug those
Okay.
loopholes.
There are
The
Very
government of India
quickly.
is not
Okay.
speaking in one voice on this.
Okay.
There are Ministry of Labour, Ministry of Rural Development
Absolutely.
which support payment of minimum wages.
Absolutely, I agree
It
with
is
that.
the CMO and the Finance Minister which is objecting to it.
Okay, yes, very quickly.
The problem,
we have
as I
just
see
no
it,
time.
is to look at this program as a issue of rights. It's not. It's a relief program. It should be seen as such. When you have, according to the CAG report, you have only 30% of the work completed. That means that no asset of any productive asset that
But
is being
still-
created.
But still, do you agree that
It
minimum
is-
wages
it
should be
is
paid or
not a
not?
productive employment scheme that
No,
the state is providing.
that is
When
what
you
is
look at it like
that
that.
is what is being challenged. It's that it's
So
it
when
has
it is a
become
relief
productive now.
program, you
Anyway,
cannot talk about.
Ethically and legally, minimum wages must be paid.
Okay. On that note, I think we have to end here. Ethically and legally, minimum wages has to be paid. The issue is before the Supreme Court. I think until the Supreme Court takes a decision, the central government also may wait for it. But if it does before that, I'm sure all the activists and everybody will be happy with it. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. T.S.R. Subramanian, Vrinda Grover, N.C. Saxena, and Priya Ranjan Dash. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on the big picture, same time on Monday.